Welcome to ProjectME, the podcast. I'm your host, Tiffany Carter, the founder of ProjectME, multi-millionaire entrepreneur, former TV newscaster, money-making expert, female empowerment speaker, and self-proclaimed office supply addict. My mission is to take the mystery out of making big money. Every week on ProjectME, the podcast, I'll share success tips, strategies, and stories from other entrepreneurs, experts, and millionaires, showing you exactly how you can achieve your most exceptional life. Now let's get to it. Exciting announcement for all of my listeners. I've officially opened my exclusive group, the ProjectME Passive Income Posse, to the public. This group is by application only, so we can keep the group high vibe and spend our time, energy, and expertise only helping those of you who truly want massive success and impact. You get live weekly trainings from me, special guest coaches, and direct access to me and my business partner for all of your questions. To learn more and apply, go to projectmewithtiffany.com, click on Work With Me, and select ProjectME Posse. And of course, any questions, feel free to DM me at ProjectME with Tiffany. Welcome to ProjectME with Tiffany Carter, the podcast and posse. I'm your host, Tiffany, and today I have on a special guest for you guys that I want you to listen to very closely. You've heard me say many times that we're all addicted to something. Some of us have been or are addicted to things that can kill you much faster, right? But all addictions can be deadly. I have brought on Jeremiah Campbell. He is been in recovery now, sober, 12 years off heroin, you guys. Like, what's more of a powerful addiction than that? But on top of that, he's an entrepreneur who has created and has even sold several seven-figure businesses. He is most well known for being a mindset transformational expert. And this has all come out of his story and the work he's done. And you guys know what I teach you, like, take your story, and that is very well part of your purpose in giving back in life. And you can make a shit ton of money doing it, or you can do it on a nonprofit basis. But I want you to hear from people who have gone through the shit and now they're shining with their own transformational journey. What's up, Jeremiah?
Thanks for having me on.
Well, I'm glad you came on. We had some drama, but you're here now.
I am. It's always on my end.
So for people who are not familiar with you, and I'm sure you've shared your story about 1 million times, but none of these people have probably heard it before. And I'd love for you to share. I mean, that's pretty powerful to hear that you were hooked on heroin and now you're not and you're this successful. So what happened?
So my childhood was amazing. My childhood, I did not have anything out of the ordinary. And this is the story that I've always told myself to make myself feel okay. So come to find out, it's not normal for pots and pans to be thrown in your house. It's not normal for your dad to be moving out as your parents separate and making loud noises going down the stairs as your dad smokes marijuana in the living room. So this isn't normal. After many, many years of sobriety, I found out that's part of the broken past, but it was normal to me because I didn't know anything different. So I started to learn a lot about who I was and what made me tick and what I was about in the early ages of my recovery. So I'm a firm believer of the process of recovery. I believe in direct sponsorship. I believe in the 12 steps. It doesn't matter which 12 steps, as long as you're with and around people that believe that they have an issue, but there's a way and a solution. So I used to be a hopeless dope fiend, and now I'm a dopeless hope fiend, is what I like to say.
I like that.
So it was. I never really got. I don't want to blame anybody or anything on my addiction, because I look back and realize my tendencies and my habits as a youngster, even before I ever even picked up drugs or alcohol. I always share that my first drug of choice was fantasy. It was something that I could put inside my brain and I could just change. And I always use the metaphor. When somebody talks about winning the lottery, it can transcend the human to somewhere else where they can think, feel, and act differently. And even when I was 5 years old, I had a beautiful, I was was born and raised middle class. My parents stayed together till I was 16 years old. They both did well enough to where I had no wants unfulfilled. So most people would look at my childhood and say, you were spoiled. Absolutely right. I was. I truly was. I was always a hard worker. But for some reason, I always felt different than anybody. I could be in a room full of people, and I've always been a talker and a people pleaser, but I never felt okay in my own skin. So slowly over time, as I started getting, in my adolescence and the junior high, people started around me. I hung around. I was like a chameleon. I had tons of groups of friends. And if I could allow each one of them to know just a little bit about me, I couldn't let anybody learn the whole story about who Jeremiah was. Because if they did, they'd find out how broken I was, and they'd find out I was a phony. So very quickly, I found out the people that did drugs, I liked the effect that the drugs gave me. First, it started with prescription pills, marijuana, drinking, things like that, until I was 16 years old, 16, 17 is when I got introduced. This was back in 2002, 2003. I got introduced to Oxycontin. Mm-hmm. So it went from Vicodin to Oxycontin. Then I got a really good job. I was always an overachiever. My first memories, I used to pass out flyers for the pizzeria at the corner, and I persuaded, instead of an hourly rate, I say, give me a set price for the whole street. And then I get the kids, down the street to do it with me. We put rollerblades on and we'd crush it. I'd pick bicycles out of the garbage and put them together and sell them on my street corner. I always had something in me that would just push me to the next level, push me beyond. I never knew what that was. And that was the divine inside of me. That was the hope showing me, hey man, whatever you're up against, there's always more. And I was always afraid to push into that. And I got introduced to a couple kids. They were doing drugs, and I just liked, when I put drugs and alcohol in my system, I never liked the taste, and I didn't want to be a loser, because everybody looks at, especially a heroin addict, as the guy living under the bridge.
Right.
And that's so far from the truth, especially now in this day and age. And I just got involved with a group of people that we found it socially acceptable to do drugs, to continue to do deeper and harder drugs. And we always drew this line that said, if I cross this line, I'll stop. But if I ever snort drugs, then I really know I got a problem. Then I'll stop. And then we just kept pushing that line back and that threshold back. And everybody around us was doing the same thing. So we thought this was normal. So right out of high school, I got a really good job painting cars. I was in college. I did the stripes on the Ford GT project. I made a lot of money, worked a ton of hours. I was in college. And then one of the guys that got a job there started bringing Oxycontin to work. And at this point, I wasn't addicted yet. It was just something that I did in passing and pleasure. The euphoric feeling that when I snorted the Oxycontin gave me, it made me feel all of those insecurities had vanished. All of a sudden, I could take a drug, or I could do some kind of form of minor mood altering chemicals, and it made me the person that I envisioned God had planned for me. And it was at this point, no, I didn't know what personal development was. I didn't know this stuff even existed. I didn't know that I had a consciousness and a subconscious mind. I didn't know anything about how the epigenetics in your brain work or neuroplasticity. None of this I knew about. All I knew was the feelings and the emotions, and I continue to let those things run through my body and dictate who I was becoming. 5 treatment centers later, I was 19 years old. It was my 5th treatment center, inpatient rehab. I didn't have a job. I was living in my mom's basement. My girlfriend at the time drove me to my 5th rehab center and bought me cigarettes. I haven't smoked in 11 years. And she brought me, and she's now my wife.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So she's known me from the good and the bad. And side note, my friends are like, I've had people chatter and be like, oh yeah, she's such a gold digger. I'm like, let me tell you about the carton of cigarettes she bought me. So in a short amount of time, it was about 3 years, I became a intravenous heroin user, which means I was shooting heroin. The bottom of the bottom. I was a liar, cheat, and a thief. I wasn't the kind of thief that stole from people that they didn't know. I only stole from people that loved me. I was a person that would go into my mom's purse or lie and manipulate only the people that loved me. And it wasn't fabulous. There was no amazing divine moment that took place. I got to the point, and now I call it the gift of desperation, where I could no longer continue to live the way that I was living in my life and continue to go on. The thought of suicide never entered into my mind. Not once. I thought maybe for some reason, that divine thing that I found early on when I was a kid came into my heart, and people would stop getting high with me because I was the guy that would finally, once we got our drugs, I would preach about why we shouldn't get high and how we were destined for more. So as soon as I got sober, my wife calls it the male version of a tramp stamp. It says destined to be right across my chest. It's across
like his chest, and I'm laughing given that I live in LA and I'm a proud member of a 12-step program of a different kind, but any open AA or NA meetings I've been to, it's like the recovery tramp stamp for men. Totally. That's hysterical. I love it.
So I got that when I was like 6 months sober, and that's just what I've continued to realize and pour into. So it was actually because I was laying tile for my neighbor. Fast forward, I was 20 years old, 5th treatment center. I'm 33 years old now. So I left my 5th treatment center and I was standing outside. I was smoking, like I had to roll my own cigarettes because I was so broke. And I had like a Rip It energy drink that was like $1. And this kid in slacks walks up to me, and his name's Ken. And he had slacks on, and he had a Red Bull, and he had like store-bought cigarettes. So he was the version of a success story to me. The simplicity of it. And he had what I call hope. And he said, "Hey, you ever do canvassing before?" And I'm like, "What is that?" And he's like, "It's knocking on doors, door to door. We're going to sell some stuff." I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "I've never done sales before." And he's like, "Dude, you can do this. I got you." And I'm like, "Okay, I don't have a car or a license or anything." He's like, "You don't worry about that. Look nice tomorrow. I'm going to come pick you up at your house." And that was the seed of entrepreneurship that was planted in me about 13 years ago. This was my 3rd rehab center that I left when I met Ken. And then after I had about 7 to 8 months clean, I knew that I'd never use drugs or alcohol ever again because I knew how great my life got. And then somebody asked me if I wanted to get high. And I said, absolutely. Why wouldn't I not? And driving to the drug spot, I said, one of us is going to statistically get high or stay and have to go back to rehab. And we both looked at each other and we're like, yeah, it's not going to be me. 2 treatment centers later. So that's when I really started to realize the depth of the disease of addiction, the depth of when I knew at the depth of my soul I would never use drugs again. And that all it took was one question. And that was when I started to realize the true meaning of surrender and the true meaning of the depth of this disease. It doesn't care how long I've been sober. It doesn't care how long or how much I continue to evolve and change. I use the analogy of when a pickle becomes a cucumber, or when a cucumber becomes a pickle, or when a caterpillar becomes a butterfly. Once I've crossed that line, there's no going back. So I just have to be okay with that. And it was weird and awkward, especially on my early entrepreneur days, where I was in the trenches and I couldn't figure out. So there was no vices. There was nothing when the stress of being broke and not knowing where my next dollar is going to come from to pay the bills, or not knowing how I was going to hire my first employees or my first team members. And I didn't know any of this, and I had no vices. So I had to face it. So in the rooms of the 12 steps meetings that I attended, I was able to come there and like get a bank account. And I was able to actually grow up in the eyes of my peers. And that's all the story that got me to starting my first business and continuing to run and grow a successful team. And just now, all of a sudden, like maybe about 6 months ago, I'm like, wait a minute, this thing's actually bigger than me. What am I doing? What is my goal in life? And then you ask those bigger questions. Why am I here? It's not just to make money. And then I realized the more 7-figure homes that I buy, the nicer cars that I buy, whatever I go to do, I'm like, man, I'm still feeling empty. Why? The stuff is no longer making me feel the way that it used to. And that's when it's starting. And that's how I'm here.
Wow. I have so many questions. Number one, I can relate. I like sharing with the audience that money's not enough, but it can be really annoying when you hear people say that who have a lot of money. When I didn't have money, if I heard someone saying that, I'd roll my eyes. Like, like mama wants like a normal meal and not top ramen. You know what I'm saying? But it is true, is like different levels, different devils. I can relate to you in that this is why I started ProjectME with Tiffany Carter. My other business, which is in pharmaceutical, medical supplements, I do digital marketing in that niche. And like, and like his niche, you guys, is in home building, masonry, that kind of a space. Very different than being, a mindset transformational expert, right? But that is what is funding your grander purpose. It doesn't fucking matter where the money is coming from, as long as it's coming from integrity, right? Not stealing it. But it doesn't matter where the money is coming from. The universe, God, your higher power will fund the greater mission you're supposed to be doing. And that's exactly what's fucking happening for you. That's so beautiful to see that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's eye opening, and it's really like, as I said, I'm huge in prayer and meditation. So like I'm meditation's changed my life. So when I get down and I meditate and I think about it, I'm like, none of this has to do with any of the thoughts or the beliefs that I have in my head. So I'm like, if this is where I've come, so which really put me on the human transformation was the change that's taken place in my life from the person I was newly sober to the person I am today. If I can take that quantum leap again, I'm talking about impacting millions of people's lives. And this all started because nobody would give me a job. That was literally the only reason I went to work with Ken, is because nobody would give me a job. Nobody believed in me enough to give me that opportunity. And that's what I do now. Let
me ask you this. When his name was Ken, right? Your buddy Ken now your buddy Ken, who came up and gave you a chance. Were you not able to get a job because you had crimes on your record? I mean, because unless you have crimes on your record, you don't have to disclose that you were, a former drug addict, right?
100% correct. So no, I did skate by without any felonies. I have a lot of misdemeanors. No, I was unemployable. So they talk about people like myself that I could not get thoughts together. So I graduated high school in 4 years, but I mean, I was so broken. And at the time, I didn't know what spiritually was. So the disease of addiction is a spiritual disease. It's the first thing to go and the last thing to come back. So it's a void in my center of my heart where I tried to act like God. So addiction is an obsession of the mind that overpowers the body. So I was so broken and so deep involved into my disease that I couldn't even, like, I'm not kidding you when I say, like, I had to I was embarrassed at some of the 12-step meetings I was at, because when they called on, they're like, Jeremiah, you need to read this. I was truly embarrassed because I couldn't even read, let alone become employable again. I used to cry in the shower that I would get a job at a collision shop making $400 a week. That's all that I wanted. That was my worth, and that's who I thought I was, and that's where I thought I was going to end up.
Wow. So when you relapsed one time or more than one time?
So it was one time. I continued to use before. So like my first 2 rehab centers, my dad picked me up and we smoked weed on the way home. Like I didn't understand that so I thought if I could just go back to the person I was before I started using hardcore drugs, that I would be fine. I had no idea the depth. And some people can do that. The classification of the alcoholic drug addict that I am, I'm not able to do that. So I have to monitor anything that's minor mood altering, caffeine included, anything that'll change those things. So for me personally, it's all encompassing to where I'm addicted to more. And it doesn't have to be good anymore. It's just that's me, and that's my personality. I'm all or nothing. That's why I found such a love with entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and you've channeled that addictive personality and energy, which doesn't ever go away, right? Just like my codependency and the stuff that, I have picked up from being in an abusive home in childhood and, having a lot of addicts in my life, right? That side of my personality, that'll never go away. But as long as it's being managed, you can integrate it into your life and create positive things with it. Because there are a lot of positive traits. Like there's a lot of people listening who have an addict in their family, grew up with an addict, are married to an addict, have a friend who's an addict, and have a lot of resentment around that, a lot of pain and a lot of hurt. And you guys, first off, I totally hear you. This is also why I had Jeremiah on, because this will help you start to heal that and see there is a human being behind the addict and behind those traits and behind that disease. But like you said, you could be addicted to anything. And I was engaged to someone like that. He actually got addicted to Monster energy drinks in sobriety to the point where he actually had a heart attack, like literally had a heart attack. And I was like, what the fuck? I'm like, you really can be addicted. Then he turned it to water. And he actually almost passed out because he was drinking so much water. If you drink too much water, it's actually bad for you. And I'm like, holy shit, this is a disease. You cannot say this is a choice. This is pure insanity. So how do you channel that addictive energy that still lives in you into entrepreneurship for the greater good?
Okay, so when I was in fourth grade, they diagnosed me, third or fourth grade, they diagnosed me with ADHD. So that was kind of what they did. They put this kid on Ritalin. He's bouncing off the walls. So now I'm watching my 5-year-old get in preschool, go ahead and he's like, they're like, oh, he's good or bad. I'm like, he's 5. He's supposed to be bouncing off the walls. Like, we're high strung. I'm super high energy. So they never taught me back then to channel your energy into something else that's going to be more productive. So people ask me, they're like, what is your superpower? And I'm like, first off, it was my ADHD that was God-given. Then it was my ability to multitask. So you'll hear some people in recovery talk about this committee in their head that takes place, and it's a conversation in my brain. So I'm watching you as you're doing one of the best interviews I've ever been part of. Thank you. And on the side of my screen, I have my email feed coming in. I'm literally in my head responding to emails while I'm in this conversation with you. And I'm like, Jeremiah, it's time to be present. It's time to be in the moment. So channeling those things. So mind you, all of this was subconscious early on. All of this, I just had this ism in me that said, you are destined for more. You need to go out there and you need to create this. So unconscious to me, I always put myself out into the future. And how does that person react? And how does that person talk? And how does that person carry himself? Now they call it the why. Like, what is your why? Well, now it's my kids and giving them choices, and it's having the opportunity to take care of my mom and like all these wonderful things, right? And I'm like, okay, cut the bullshit. What really makes you get up in the morning? Like, what gets me out of bed and gets me excited? And I got one of my masterminds, I got the opportunity to meet a guy, and I asked him, I said, what is it? What can I do to know my why? And he goes, Jeremiah, it's got to fire you up more when you're done than when you had started.
Ooh, I love that.
Dean Graziosi, one of the coolest, he's been my virtual mentor without even knowing it. And then I got the opportunity to meet him. And so what that really pushes me. And so what I do to channel it is I take a ton of notes. I'm not kidding you. I have sticky notes. They're everywhere in my life. I'm going through different programs and different things, but focusing my why on what really pushes me out of bed in the morning. And a lot of times for early on, it was money. More than anything else is I have this longing. So some people say fear or love. Well, Tony Robbins always like, what pushes you harder? And mine is a fear of somebody telling me I told you so. So when I got to that, I'm like, okay. So then my mentors and my coaches are like, why do you worry about that? Why do you care? And let's get honest about it. It all boils down to being unworthy, of not feeling my worth. And that boils down to my addiction. And that boils down to my family and the way that I was raised and the belief systems that I inherited from my parents and from the people around me and society. So what I do is I just have a clear vision, and I know that I'm going to, no matter what, outwork anybody. And when I put my superpowers to work for me, and that's what I get through my meditation, and I harness into the quantum field, and I get these energies flowing and these emotions growing, I used to hide behind this thing that I was analytical. And I'm like, oh, you're such a liar. I'm like, you're the most passionate person you know. Like, let's be honest about it. Passion, analytical, hard to go together. I don't know. Like, I'm like, well, I just want to know the facts. It's like, shut up, dude. Like, all you care about is how is it going to make you feel right now in this moment? And does it feel good? So go. So I to answer your question in a long short, to harness that passion, I have to have a vision of where that passion is going to take me. And the money, trust me, I still love money. I still like super nice stuff. But it only gets me so far. And the real passion comes in from watching the human beings, the light bulb kick on in somebody's head, whether it's in recovery, whether it's in business coaching, whether it's in a speaking engagement, whatever I get to do when I get to connect with that one person, it's worth all of the work.
I totally feel you. And it doesn't have to come from, it's not like you get paid to sponsor people in recovery. When you go guest speak in the rooms of recovery, you are being of service. It's free, right? You guys know that I'm a big supporter of my safe houses where we rescue the girls who've been sex trafficked. I don't get paid. I'm not allowed to bring a phone in there for their safety purposes and mine. There's no accolades. I don't get an award, but it fills me up so much and I'm not even making money off it. But mama loves money. And that money comes, I don't care how it comes. It comes through my passive income, through my investments, through my coaching, whatever it is, that money comes. So I do want you guys to just marinate on this throughout the day-to-day and ask yourself that question instead of that like simplistic kind of overdone thing of like, what's your why? That's become a whole thing. Get much deeper than that. What really is it? And keep peeling it back like, Jeremiah took you. So I want to go back to something. I very much relate to it. And I know a lot of the listeners do too, because like I said in the beginning, we are all addicted to something. We're addicted to food, relationships, sex, shopping, scrolling on the internet, Netflix, something that takes you outside of yourself so you don't have to feel, so you can numb and dissociate. All of us do. And it's a lot of times shit that you do when no one's watching. All right. So I want to go back to when you said you remembered even before you started using that you always felt different. You always felt like you were different than other people. And I know you don't mean different like I was hand delivered by God and I'm meant for more. I know that's not what you meant. So can you take us back to that point and explain a little more what you meant by different? Because I really feel a lot of people are going to relate to this.
Absolutely. So being in a room full of people, even to this day, and being in a room full of loving people, even on Thanksgiving, and then all of a sudden I'll start identifying with a feeling of anxiety or disconnect so now it's the same feeling that I had back then. And it always boils down to being unworthy of people's love and kindness. And so I remember as far back as I can remember, a kid down the street, his dad passed away of cancer. And I remember the attention that he received. And I had compassion. I was full of love, but I always thought that I have crazy thoughts, right? I have a broken thought process. That's what makes me who I am. So
I fucking love you addicts. You guys are so entertaining to me.
So some of the most creative people and the most energetic people.
Oh, absolutely. And the smartest. Absolutely.
I love that. Thank you very much. So what it was I always thought if I could just be the kid down the street, if my parents would drive the car, and I always thought the grass was green around the other side. I never looked. This was before social media. This was before internet ever came around. And I remember if I could just be that kid down the street, because he thinks differently. He doesn't know the pain that I'm going through. Mind you, I'm bubbles and rainbows and bubble gum. And there was no real loss, no real disconnect. But I always just wanted, and especially in junior high when like, Abercrombie and Fitch came out and all these different things. And there was like the frosted tips in your hair. And I wasn't really gifted at any specific sport. I always did extreme sports, go figure. I never played well.
Of course you did.
So I always had to be different. And I'm like, okay, so what sets me apart from those guys? And it all boiled down to just, I wanted the attention, whether it was bad or good. I just needed to have the attention. And my love language is affirmations. And I'm like, my wife made me take that. And she's like, I'm like, it's physical touch. Of course. Like, what would you mean?
That's what every guy says. Yeah.
And I really thought it was. And I'm like, oh, I must have took the test wrong or something. And it's affirmations. And it's just feeling loved and wanting to feel important. So back then it was just always wanting to, I never lost my baby fat. I'm 33, still haven't lost my baby fat. I'm like, what? Like, why are you judging yourself? I always judge the moment based upon how I feel. So early on, it wasn't that way. So now I realize that I'm addicted to emotions and feelings. I'm addicted to greed. I'm addicted to so many different negative attributes where anxiety and dread. And I get these things and I'll search. And this is just over the last year or so where I get these things in my brain where I'm like, I'm anxious. Why am I anxious? I don't know why I'm anxious. And then I'll start looking for things outside of me to justify the anxiety that my body's searching for. And I'm like, man, and this is the same feelings I had when I was a kid. So then, I went through the emotion code and hired an emotion coach, and they try to rock these things out of me and do all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, and all of it is just, it's a part of being self-discovery and trying to take myself out of who I am. So then I started learning about the analytical mind and breaking into your subconscious mind and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, I just want to feel whole. I want to feel joy. And I want to feel love. And I can only get those things when I feel those things myself about me. So I only attract more of what I already am. So when and being a manifestation coach and doing all these things in my life where I'm like, okay, I can manifest this, but I have to become exactly what I'm trying to be. And the minute that I think I'm different from it, or I have to look for it, because that's what I do. I'm a doer. What do you mean I can't do to get to this point? And I'm like, okay, so now I have to become these things. And then the more and more I become these things where I'm joyful and I'm happy, and I just love Jeremiah for Jeremiah for the first time in like my entire life.
Like for Jeremiah, unshowered, in your sweatpants, chilling on the couch, not working. You love that Jeremiah just as much as the Jeremiah on the podcast right now, or the Jeremiah on a stage, right? That's what you're saying.
Trying to. So,
I love your honesty.
I'm trying to get there, but like I don't like for me, like I come home and I set my phone down for the first 30 minutes undivided. My kids get my attention. I have to, because I need them to feel that love, because I always had that. Like my mom and dad, like I got on my knees and prayed with my mom and dad till as far as I can remember. And my dad still, like when I see my dad today, my dad still kisses me on the cheek. My mom loves me and sends me, like, my dad's a writer, writes his words, and then my mom's a teller. Or more than that, my mom's a shower of her love and appreciation. So I've had all these things. And I'm like, what is it that I still don't feel worthy? I still don't feel like I'm worthy of somebody's love. And I'm still working to get to the point of my life where that all makes sense.
So something that I teach and I speak on regularly is the connection between low self-worth and low net worth. So if your, bank account isn't looking good, or you're in a lot of debt or have financial drama, the first place to look is yourself, is your own worth. Now, given you're successful, right? You're a multimillionaire. Was that fair to say? Okay. Absolutely. So you're a multimillionaire. You have all these great businesses, yet you still are working on feeling worthy just for being you as God intended you to be, as you are created, without any accolades, without anyone telling you you're great, without you going and doing and being of service. So it's interesting, because yet you still have a lot of money in the bank. So I want the people listening to understand this self-worth thing. This is a lifelong journey. It's not like you arrive at the ultimate land of self-worth and then you're done. It ebbs and flows. So can you explain a little bit like how, as you worked on your self-worth, how your money area of your life and the manifestation of abundance increased? Because I know it did.
Oh, tremendously. So it's all about who you surround yourself with. And that's when I started. It was, so I'm in Chris Harder group now for the love of money. And before that, I was one of the founding members of the Arte Syndicate with Ed Milet and Andy Frisella. And I got around a group of people, 60 crazy people that had no idea what we were signing up for. We gave them $50,000 and we're like, hey, we're going to go be part of this group. And it was that group when I got to be around individuals. So when you're in, like, I'm from just outside of Detroit, Michigan. And from my friends, I have a couple friends that are more successful, like friends, people that I have dinner with. And I'm, to put it bluntly, I'm a lot more successful than 95% of the people that I hang out with. So I have to go fly usually to California to hang out with you guys to see really what abundance looked like. I didn't know what that, like, I read Think and Grow Rich 10 years ago, and I joined a mastermind group, like a small knit of my buddy, my sponsor, like a few different people. So the mindset of abundance and the scale of thinking big and reading these different books is so far bigger. Like, all I wanted was a white picket fence, 2.5 kids, 2 cars, and a mortgage. I came up with the belief that my dad taught me, if I could pay my mortgage with one paycheck, that I've arrived. Like, and that my house was the biggest investment that I ever had. So I'm still broken when it comes to that. And when it comes to like the beliefs and what are you doing? And I'm like, well, why would you ever have a mortgage payment? That's ridiculous. Like, I'm big into real estate. I love like making enough money to where I buy real estate, and I love the passive income from real estate. And I have recovery homes, 3-quarter houses, and like all of these things that continue to generate more revenue. But it's the bigger focus. So the more I feel worthy about myself, the better I feel, the more I can manifest and create things. So a lot of people don't, I know your listeners all know about manifestation and what the reality is, but you only become more of what you already are. So when I become grateful, because gratitude is the ultimate form of receivership. So without gratitude, nothing's going to happen. And that's one of the number one spiritual traits or the spiritual principles of a 12-step program is, so I was told early on, they go, a grateful alcoholic will never drink. So I'm like, oh, okay. So what does that mean? They're like, well, anger and upsetting and all of these things. And these are beliefs towards myself. So one of the biggest amends that I've ever made was to myself, is for forgiving myself. So how am I going to turn my mess into a message to better help somebody else? And it's not really like, for me, it's not like helping people. And we've done it. I've spoke at 15, 20 different high schools, multiple years in a row, bringing the message of hope, providing these different things. But the worthiness and the continue to working on I spend every morning at least 1 hour in meditation, and that's just to get past who I think I am. So I really buy into Dr. Joe Dispenza's work and going to becoming nobody and no one and no thing and nowhere and no time, which means I have to detach myself from everything that I think is important to get past who I believe I am in order to get to the person that I want to become. So I have to separate myself, and that's how the only way that I can tune in is to get past who I think I am, what I think I own, and all of these things, because I place my worth and who I am upon that. And I'm like, Jeremiah, none of it matters. Because then I look at myself, when I'm dead, what are they going to be saying about me at my funeral? And they never talk about all the fancy cars or the houses or what
your
I think
asset,
I need to do.
I like to say, like, your assets are not listed on your tombstone.
Never are. But yet everybody's dying to get them.
Literally. I almost died trying to get them. Because like I said, now for the 3rd time, we are all addicted to something. You guys know that, I am in recovery for exercise addiction. And I like to say I'm recovered because I'm further along, but, as being a workaholic. And that literally almost killed me to go after those things. So, Jeremiah, for people who are listening, who are filled with that like self-doubt, they're trying to build a business and they feel like they're going 5 steps forward and 7 steps back, and they get confused and they feel lost, they feel stuck. What do you have for them in terms of advice where they can get more clarity, get grounded, get back into themselves?
Okay. It comes to me is celebrating the small wins. So my body doesn't care whether something good or bad takes place. My body only responds to an emotion of the past. So for me personally is when I wake up in the morning and I have a negative thought or I don't want to get out of bed, I say, most won't, I will. Most won't, I will. I'm living the best form of my life and at the best time. Everything happens for me, not to me. How can I better serve somebody else? What can I do today, right now? And for me, it's physical activity. And I absolutely love the word that you brought up, recovered, because we do recover. And it is something that we completely change back to, because we can use that. And then what wisdom is a memory of the past that you don't have an emotion attached to. So how much more wisdom can I have? And it's by staying neutral, and it's not reacting to it, because all of a sudden I'll get anxiety, try to look for an outside things. And I say change, or I say stop, and I'll verbally say it. My wife looks at me like I'm crazy. And sometimes that ass kicking machine, I wake up and I'm like, so I have a huge, my wife and I bought our dream house, and it's twice over budget. And we were supposed to sell one of our other properties, and that didn't sell. It flooded instead. And I'm like, okay, tough guy, put your money where your mouth is, and things happen for you and not to you. So how is this trying to figure out what am I going to do? So I'm personally putting all of this stuff into action. So to get the clarity is if you don't believe in yourself, nobody else ever will. So when those people tell me, hey, you can't do that, and I say, watch me. So I try to harness when somebody tells me something, or that's not a good idea. So then I'm real. And I tell every one of my team members, watch who you take advice from. If you're not willing to change places with the person that's giving you advice, no matter how much they love you, they have no authority to give you that.
My favorite is all the unsolicited advice that I get. I'll get it on the street, at the gym, in my DMs, and it makes me laugh. Like, and I use a lot of humor. That's one of my ways, and you guys can use that as well if it feels good to you. That's one way that I manage when those kind of feelings come up. Like if I'm having some self-doubt, or people are I get haters. You know what I say? I'm like, I've fucking made it. I have haters. That's legit. I use humor because it's funny, and it also takes away, like you said, that attachment to it. Right? I've just detached in a loving way from those negative thoughts or negative people. So I have to ask you this, because my audience gets really irritated when I don't ask certain questions. And I have this way, my intuitive energy, I know what it is they want me to ask. And if I don't, they get pissed. So number one, is your wife a recovered substance addict?
Nope.
How, I know you don't want to probably speak for her, but how do you guys manage that dynamic of, so to speak, as we call it in recovery, a normie, meaning someone who is not a substance, an earth person, someone who's not a substance addict, gambling addict, food addict, etc. So how do you manage that dynamic of a normie in your house with someone like yourself with that addict energy?
Woo. So being an addict, I'm a master of manipulation. So
yes, you are.
I'll put that right out there. And one of my superpowers is I'm devilishly charming. So, and she knows that. So I can use that to my favor or my disadvantage. So when my creator gives me what I want when I want it, I will always take advantage of it, or I will never be grateful for it, or it'll be the wrong thing at the wrong time. My creator and I have a super funny relationship where he's like, okay, here you go, dude, take it. And I'm like, oh, what am I supposed to do with this now? So it's just having that loving relationship. And I know, so for instance, this weekend, she says to me something about, she'll say, my wife's a fitness competitor. So she's addicted to competing. So she does, she gets on the stage, she's a bikini model, and, it doesn't suck, I promise. But I'll barter with her. I'll barter with her. She's like, hey, I want to go to the gym. And we have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, 2 boys. And I'll be like, I'll barter with her with sex. I'll be like, hey, well, her name's Mallory. And I'll say, well, you go to the gym, you can make up for it tonight. So she like reacted to me. Like, she's like, you do know, like, I feel guilty when I go to the gym. And she came at me like a ton of bricks. And so my mind and my ego wants to say, you don't understand, and I can throw all this stuff because, my companies make the money, and all this egotistical bullshit that I think that I should put some kind of a label on, but it's loving her more than I love myself. And I know that's unhealthy, and a lot of times you should love yourself more, but I try to put myself in the other person's shoes and I say, what would bring her more value and what would bring more value to my family? And 80% of the time, I don't want to think like that. Remember, first thought wrong. So I'll have to say, okay, get out of your own way. Don't attach a meaning to it. Just do it. Because I'll be like, well, I stay home for the kids, so it's not even about you. And I'm like, why would you say that? It wasn't coming from love and tolerance. And why speak when it's not coming from a place of love? So it's just having those disciplines in place and being around somebody and giving her the same love and respect that I want in return.
Yeah, it is discipline of mind, of speech, of thought. This is what all of this boils down to that we talked about today. Like I say, mindset work, manifestation work is like stretching at the gym. People blow it off, yet it's the most important thing in order to have, a sustainable, amazing, long life filled with, flexibility and be pain-free. Yet people avoid it because of the discipline factor. So I really appreciate your answer there. Hey, if you guys love this episode and love the guests I have on, do me a favor. When you are done listening to this, go hop over on iTunes and leave a 5-star written podcast review. I have a goal of getting 200 5-star written podcast reviews by Thanksgiving. And I know how much you guys love the show. It takes 90 seconds. If you don't know how to do it, do what I always tell you to do. Google it. There's only like 5 quick steps, and say what you liked about the episode, what you liked about Jeremiah, what you appreciate that he shared, what I shared. And this is what helps the show keep going on. This is not free to produce. It comes from a place of love, but I would welcome to get that feedback and love in return from you guys. All right, Jeremiah, I want to hear, I've been asked a million times when I'm interviewed on shows, like, do you have any final words for people? It's like, that's way too much happening. That's way too much pressure. What I want to ask you, since you are a manifestation expert, is there a mantra? You did mention one that earlier on, but is there a mantra that if it feels good to people, they could borrow it? A mantra that you use that helps with the energy of receiving and feeling worthy and deserving of abundance that you use?
So the main mantras that I use in my head is I'm living the best version of myself, or the best version at how does it go? I'm living my best version of my life, and I'm living the dream version of who I want to become. So I'm big into mind movies, but I continue to just go into my mind and say, you already are love, and there's no separation. And I kind of have a conversation with myself. I have a whole list of mantras if I'm really fighting it that bad that I can share with somebody if they DM me. But going into my mind and just closing my eyes and visualizing the love of the relationships. And I don't know if any of your audience has ever done a mind movie, but it's a 3D. You make it you upload all your stuff to it, and it's a 3D vision board. But it has sound, it has music. I mean, and then it has
This is amazing.
Gosh. Yeah, Mind version 4.0 is the one I use, and you can make it as long or as short as you want, and then you can Photoshop yourself into your visions of like. So my wife and I have mine, and my first 7 slides are my wife and I about how we support each other and how we're a force for good, and then I have myself on a podcast, and just visualizing and it changes. It changes everything about who I am, and it changes it about my vision of where I'm going to go.
Oh my God, I love this. How can people reach out and connect with you? Maybe they're driving right now. They're hiding in a corner at work with one AirPod in and listening. I know you guys. And they want to know more about this whole mind movie thing, or they have questions about addiction, or maybe they have a loved one who is addicted and they're not sure how to handle it. Where's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Instagram is, I'm on Facebook as well, but Instagram, it's at Jeremiah_Campbell.
Okay. And we'll make sure, you guys, like, that's in the show notes. And then when we share this episode, I'll make sure to tag him. And you guys, take a screenshot right now and share this episode on Instagram. Tag me at ProjectME with Tiffany. Tag Jeremiah at Jeremiah_Campbell. If you are driving or you're doing God knows what, some crazy multitasking activity, you can just tag me because I know you have mine memorized, and I'll reshare it in my stories and tag Jeremiah so you can send him the love and he can connect with you guys. But I'm sure you're really good about answering your DMs, especially if there's people who, want to discuss addiction, recovery, manifestation, all the things with you. Is that true?
I respond to every DM I've ever received.
I believe that. In fact, he responded to mine. So there's proof right there. Well, thanks so much for coming on, sharing your heart, your recovery journey, all your amazing insights and tips. This has been purely delightful and fascinating for me. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please write a 5-star review on iTunes. Not only will this make me super happy, but it will allow more listeners to find our special show. Simply help me help others.